On Tuesday night, sometime between 10 p.m. and midnight, Iran launched 200 ballistic missiles at targets across our region, spanning nearly 200 kilometers. 200. Not dozens. Not dozens of drones mixed with some older generation weaponry. 200 ballistic missiles, each one carrying a warhead designed to penetrate hardened structures, launched in coordinated waves across multiple launching points, spread across Iranian territory. And when those missiles impacted their targets, they did it in a way that fundamentally altered the military calculus of this entire conflict. Because here's what the mainstream narrative is getting completely wrong. They're treating this as escalation. They're treating it as Iran fired 200 missiles, and then showing you footage of air defense systems intercepting some of them and declaring victory. Interception footage, a few fireballs in the night sky, American and Israeli officials claiming they stopped the majority of inbound threats. This is the story the Pentagon wants you to accept. But it's not what happened. What actually happened is something far more consequential. And understanding why requires you to understand the difference between tactical victory and strategic shift. Let me be specific about what we're looking at. The missiles Iran launched on Tuesday night were not the older generation weapons we've seen in previous strikes. These were Kheibar Shekan missiles and advanced ballistic systems designed specifically to defeat the exact air defense networks that the United States and Israel have deployed across the region. The Kheibar Shekan has a reported range of 2,000 kilometers and is designed with a maneuvering warhead that shifts trajectory mid-flight to evade interception. It's not a weapon system developed 3 decades ago that America's defense systems had learned to track. It's a system developed over the last 5 years specifically to counter the technological advantages America spent the last 2 decades building. 200 of them. Think about the industrial capacity that means. Think about the manufacturing capability. Think about the decision-making. When a country launches 200 advanced ballistic missiles, you're not looking at a panicked reaction. You're looking at a calculated strategic move. You're looking at someone who built these weapons, stored them, protected them, waited for the exact moment when deploying them would create maximum strategic effect. And they decided that moment was now. Here's what the Pentagon is claiming happened. They say American air defense systems intercepted between 80 to 120 of those missiles. That's their official narrative. That's what they're telling Congress and what they're telling the American public. But think about the physics of that claim. 200 missiles launched. They're coming from multiple vectors. They're coming from low-altitude approaches that compromise radar detection. They're coming with maneuvering warheads designed to evade interception. And somehow, in a war where American defense systems have already been degraded by weeks of prior strikes, somehow 80 to 120 of these advanced missiles were stopped. The percentage doesn't add up. The timing doesn't match. The physics makes it mathematically impossible. What you're actually looking at is a strike where most of the missiles reached their targets. The American military knows this. The Israeli military knows this, which is why the narrative shifted within hours from "we stopped them" to "we absorbed the damage" to "we're fine. Nothing to worry about." The goalposts moved because the initial claim was already indefensible. Now let's understand why Iran made this move right now. This wasn't random. This wasn't a tactical response to a tactical provocation. This was a strategic decision made by people who have studied American responses, understood the constraints on American decision-making, and calculated that launching 200 ballistic missiles would create a situation where the American government faces a choice it doesn't actually have a good answer for. Here's the strategic reality on the ground. The United States has been, over the course of this conflict, systematically degrading Iran's ability to launch ballistic missiles. American and Israeli strikes have targeted Iranian missile factories, assembly facilities, and storage depots. The intelligence has been good. The strikes have been precise. The damage has been real. Months of this campaign has reduced Iran's accessible inventory of advanced ballistic systems by estimates somewhere between 30 to 50%. That's significant. That's the kind of attrition rate that should, on paper, degrade an adversary's ability to conduct large-scale operations. Except Iran just proved that degradation doesn't work the way the Pentagon thinks it does. Because the missiles Iran launched on Tuesday night were not emergency inventory. They were not hastily assembled missiles pulled from damaged facilities. Satellite imagery before this strike showed Iranian Revolutionary Guard storage sites being emptied over the course of the past month. Systematically, deliberately, moving missiles from visible locations to hardened bunkers that could survive strikes. The Iranian military was clearly anticipating this operation and preparing for it. They saw the window coming. They built these systems. They protected them. And they saved them specifically for this moment. Think about what that implies. Think about the confidence it takes to watch American strikes degrade 30 to 50% of your missile inventory, and then respond by launching 200 new missiles that you've somehow kept hidden through an entire campaign of intelligence gathering and airstrikes. That's not desperation. That's not panic. That's strategic patience, combined with better operational security than American intelligence gave them credit for. The missiles that hit their targets on Tuesday night struck what? That's the question everyone is asking now. American officials are remaining vague. Israeli officials are claiming air defense success while simultaneously requesting additional air defense systems from Washington. Both are classic signs that more damage occurred than the official narrative admits. There are reports of strikes on military installations in Iraq, Syria, and the occupied Palestinian territories. There are reports of secondary explosions at American bases. There are reports of direct impacts on structures the Pentagon isn't ready to have destroyed. The inconsistency in the official story is telling. When governments have good news, they announce it immediately. When they're sorting through damage reports and figuring out what to tell the public, they stay silent while their narrative coordinators work overtime. But here's what matters more than the specific damage. What matters is what this strike demonstrates to every military planner on Earth watching this conflict unfold. It demonstrates that despite months of American strikes targeting Iranian missile production, despite months of intelligence collection and precision bombing, Iran still has the capacity to build, conceal, and launch hundreds of advanced weapons. It demonstrates that American degradation campaign either failed or was always going to achieve less than advertised. It demonstrates that the attrition model the Pentagon was using to plan this war was operating on faulty assumptions. This changes the entire calculation for any other country that's been deterred from challenging American power by the assumption that the United States could simply bomb away a threat. China is watching this. Russia is watching this. Every country in the Middle East is watching this. They're watching Iran launch 200 advanced missiles at the most powerful military on Earth and absorb the damage. They're watching the American response be to claim victory while simultaneously asking Congress for more air defense funding. The strategic messaging is clear. American defense technology can be defeated. American military planning can be outmaneuvered. The question is no longer whether you can challenge American power. The question is whether you're willing to accept the cost. And that question is already being answered. Oil hit $78 a barrel on Wednesday. This is the 7th major spike in oil prices in the past month. Every time there's a significant escalation, every time a major American military installation absorbs significant damage, every time the level of disruption to Gulf security increases, the oil market spikes. And the spikes are coming faster. They're coming bigger. The trajectory is clear. Traders, investors, and markets are pricing in an assumption that the baseline level of oil market disruption is permanently higher. The Strait of Hormuz, which carries roughly 30% of the world's seaborne oil trade, has moved from being a theoretical point of vulnerability to being an actual point of concern. Shipping insurance has increased. Shipping routes are being rerouted. And every rerouted tanker, every increased insurance premium, every extra day of sailing time gets priced into the cost of oil. At $78 a barrel, Americans at the gas pump are paying roughly 3 cents more per gallon than they were a month ago. That doesn't sound dramatic until you multiply it by 150 million cars and dozens of refueling trips per vehicle per month. It adds up, and the oil price isn't the ceiling. Analysts who study energy markets are now quietly discussing whether another significant escalation could push oil toward $100 a barrel. And at $100 a barrel, the economic impact on the United States becomes visible in places the average American actually lives. Your heating bills increase, your grocery costs rise, the airline tickets that already increased in price increase again, the cost of manufacturing anything that requires shipping increases, and all of this is traceable back to a military conflict that most Americans have been trying to ignore. Here's the brutal honesty nobody in Washington is willing to articulate. The American military cannot prevent Iran from launching ballistic missiles. It can damage the facilities where they're built. It can destroy some of the inventory. It can make the program more expensive. But it cannot stop Iran from building advanced ballistic missiles and launching them. The only thing that stops that is either regime change, which isn't militarily achievable in this time frame, or negotiation, which the current American administration has taken off the table. And Iran knows this, which is why they launched 200 missiles on Tuesday night. They're demonstrating that the American strategy of attrition and degradation has limitations. They're demonstrating that they can survive that strategy and still maintain offensive capability. They're demonstrating that they're willing to escalate in ways that make the cost of this conflict impossible to ignore. 200 missiles means 200 separate impacts on radar systems, 200 separate interception attempts, 200 separate moments where American air defense systems have to make a choice between stopping this missile or preparing for the next one. That's not a sustainable military position. That's a war the United States is losing, not tactically on individual days, but strategically in the context of months. And the longer this goes on, the more obvious it becomes. The Iranian military just proved something that strategists have been theorizing about for years. They proved that American dominance in a region depends on assumptions that are no longer valid. It depends on the assumption that American technology can intercept most threats. It depends on the assumption that American allies will absorb the cost of military conflict in their own territory. It depends on the assumption that economic pain will pressure the adversary to surrender before it pressures the American public to demand withdrawal. All three assumptions just got tested in the span of one night. All three failed, and somewhere in Tehran, the military planners who authorized this strike are already calculating what comes next. Because this wasn't the endpoint. This was another phase in a war that's operating on a different timeline than American military planning anticipated.